Well, you can't get a much different perspective than a Buckeye. So let's get to the 10-minute war with our good friend Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, has a phenomenal channel right here on YouTube, and that's what it's called. And this is not that you don't want to watch it year-round, but especially here in the off-season, guys. This is when you get ahead of future markets and betting markets. You get a lot of information from people that he has on all over the country that cover the sport year-round. It'll make you some money, I promise you. And it's good to see you again, my friend. How are you?
Good to see you, Steve. It's been a while, and I'll let everybody know that we're in the midst of coaches' rankings. We're going through all the Power 5 conferences and running through our coaches' rankings, and we typically save the Big Ten and the SEC for the final couple days, so we'll see where your guy stacks up in the Big Ten.
Good stuff. Well, let's get to, I know you've had a chance to look at some of my takeaways from spring football, which I was just discussing. And to me, the two meta ones is the overall level of depth is way above what I've seen in this program in many a moon. In fact, I think you got to go back probably towards the 03, 04, 06, that last great run of attempted greatness that Lloyd Carr had. I think that's probably the last time we had this kind of comprehensive depth on the roster. And then I just see what we call tradition, which is really swagger, competitiveness, culture. I really saw that come out in this team in ways we haven't seen at Michigan a lot over the last 10, 15 years, and haven't seen in the Harbaugh era since right after he first took over and tried to reinstill it. Those are some of my big takeaways, and we can get into those or more of a micro look at particular positions if you want, but tell me what you're thinking.
Well, Steve, I caught the last few lines of your take, and you reiterated what Jim Harbaugh stated a few weeks ago when he said, "We're scary good." Maybe my role on this show as we progress is becoming to bring this more into balance. So for those many months, as you recall, especially going back to that awful 2020 season, I tended to be lifting your spirits and
True.
lifting you, or attempting to, I should say, your optimism and your perspective on the program. Maybe I'm going to start to suppress it down the other way a little bit now, bring a little balance to this. I do think, to your point, that specifically in the speed category, I see more waves of players with top-end speed, with really good speed at the perimeter positions on both sides of the football than what we've seen in the past. So to extend on your depth narrative there from the speed perspective. I'll go from the top here. Cade McNamara obviously quartered for both teams right out of the gate. He's the only guy that didn't get touched, and I will credit Jim Harbaugh and the approach of the spring game. Not that there's not reason to put the quarterbacks out of harm's way, but it brings validity to it in terms of the pass rush and the quarterback's escapability when they're live, when they're in play. So that was good to see there. Just it gives you another dimension of what does the pass rush really look like. We're not bringing quarterbacks down in the fall by a fingernail. So that doesn't happen. So what is that really going to look like there? And especially with missing the two stud defensive ends from last season's team. But Cade McNamara, he's established himself to the point where it shouldn't be alarming what we saw on Saturday, but it also gives cause to pause and say, is he ever going to progress even more? Is he going to become a better player, or is he the 21 version of Cade McNamara from here on out, and this is what he is, which is fine, but he just misses throws. I don't know. I think he's shown us both in the spring game, but that being a confirmation of what we saw last season, is that most of the time he's not going to be threading a needle from distance. So that's one takeaway. I brought up the speed on the outside. A lot of successful transitions from offense to defense or defense to offense for a number of players. And of course, Hassan Haskins was the poster child for that, and with rave reviews, and remarkable what he accomplished as a running back of making that transition from running back to linebacker, then to running back. But those seem to be successful transitions as maybe role players. But the one guy that could be a standout at his new position is, of course, Mike Sanders, who on a few deep passes and where he was challenged, certainly was in position, to make plays and break up passes and looked up to the challenge like he's made that a smooth transition. And so that stands out to me. I heard some rumblings about AJ Henning possibly being like a Deebo Samuel type player. I don't necessarily see that in his body build. He doesn't look like the guy that could necessarily take that kind of beating and punishment on a regular basis. Just a few things that come to mind, but I'm going to offer this one up to you, Steve, before I throw it back to you. 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. I'm not discounting Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards between the tackles, but they're more space guys. Hassan Haskins could be missed in those kind of situations against quality fronts.
So 2 points I think that I definitely want to address. Let's start with Cade, and then we'll go to the missing of Hassan Haskins and what it is that he brought to the table, because this actually ties anything to the Cade conversation. You know, Lou Holtz used to say that he always coached as if he had a different team every week, because he had, you know, these are college kids, right? Okay. And you don't know finals, girls, parents, injuries, all the things that can go on that can be distractions. You could have a different team on a week-to-week basis. That's why guys like you and me who do handicapping on the side, we're looking for let-down spots and what are right desperate situations, right? We're analyzing those kinds of trend lines. The same is true on a year-to-year basis. On a year-to-year basis, you're a different team year-to-year. Even if you're bringing a lot of people back, and we are. I think I told you before, 33 of the 47 players that were on the 2-deep in the Orange Bowl, we are bringing back, okay? But you're a different team every year. Last year was really about stabilizing the program. And it just and the triage just went better in real time than anybody thought, to the point that the patient got up and actually didn't even need a gurney to get to the ambulance, just walked into the ambulance on his own and said, "What's up?" You know, I mean, so no one could have guessed that, though. No one could have guessed. I did say before the season that I thought we'd have some kind of like meltdown or 85 breakthrough. I didn't think it'd be anything in between. But you were a little more optimistic than me going in for sure, because I thought a meltdown was more likely. But the triage went well, and I think that Cade McNamara performed his function as a paramedic very well. But a paramedic is not a doctor. And I think maybe what you're learning is at best he might be a nurse practitioner, but he is still not a doctor. And this is a game, he faced a pass rush, but he wasn't going to get hit. There's speed and receivers all over the place. And you still can't show me, there was nothing in, and how many plays did he play? A lot. There was nothing there I thought, well, that's different. That's new. And I really think the possibility is he's just tapped out from a talent standpoint. And hey, if your tap out is, you know, I won a Big Ten championship, there's worse tap outs than that, right? The problem is this year's team is different. And last year we had an historically great pass rush. We are not going to have that again. I don't think the defense is going to fall off the map at all, but it'll just look different. And it's going to require taking more risk than we had to take last year. Last year, we could do a lot of stuff with leaving people in front of us. Everybody keeps talking about, oh, you won the game against Ohio State because the snow. Stroud threw for 400 flipping yards. Okay. Our game plan last year was we're just staying back. We're not giving up big plays. We're not going over the top. We'll have those two guys that coming off the edge. Eventually they'll play game wrecker eventually. And we wanted to win wars of attrition last year because offensively that's how we were playing. We had one guy run for 20 touchdowns, another guy run for nearly 1,000 yards. Okay, so we were fine. That was our game flow. If you beat us in a war of attrition, we were okay with that because that's what we wanted the game to be. Okay, this year defensively we're going to have to take more risks to rush the passer, to pressure the passer, and that is invariably going to mean there will be more big plays given up on the back end, which gets back into complementary football. Invariably, that means we're going to have to score more points on the offensive side and more explosively at times to compensate for that. And so this sort of trench warfare that we played last year, we don't have the backs for it. Now, I think we have two better pro prospects for backs. All right, but 3rd and 2 and 3rd and 3 aren't running downs for us now, like they were the last 2 years with Haskins. The only running back in the last 5 years of college football that gained more yards after contact than Hassan Haskins was Najee Harris. That's pretty damn good company, okay? So we are going to have to be more of it. We have big play backs. We kind of have more Ohio State style of backs, frankly. I mean, Blake Corum almost looks like a spitting image of J.K. Dobbins from a physicality personality standpoint, doesn't have quite that level of ability, but their game styles are very similar. So, and then you got all these receivers. We are going to have to be more of a big play offense. And I'm not confident that he's a big play quarterback. And I went into the spring after JJ's shoulder injury thinking, well, that just does it. There's no way he can, make up the ground without throwing a competitive pass in the spring. I don't think that anymore. In fact, I kind of think you're probably looking at a Kelly Bryant, Trevor Lawrence situation. And it's just a matter of, at what juncture of the season does it become obvious? And you have to be careful here because Cade is incredibly popular with his teammates, as is JJ as well. So you need to do it at a time that it's obvious that we've maxed ourselves out, right? So you almost have to probably do it after it's obvious you need to do it than before, because you don't want to wreck the chemistry of the team. But I think you and I are pretty astute college football fans. We've been doing this since our first rodeo. You can kind of see that it's heading towards that trajectory, right? Eventually.
Yeah, and I don't know what the teams individual within the locker rooms with their preferences are between the two quarterbacks or how much of an allegiance they had toward Cade McNamara. But when you got that Big Ten championship ring, that makes it somewhat different of a dynamic than Kelly Bryant, who had accomplished nothing, who had shown that I'm going to be a capable quarterback. I can lead this team because there's so much talent to 11-1 or 10-2, but it's going to be the playoffs that's going to make the difference for that particular Clemson team. And that, of course, proved to be the right decision. But in this matter, do you wait until when it becomes obvious, is obvious losing a game that you may not be able to afford to lose, or is obvious, struggling to score 30 points against some of the cream puffs in the 4-game non-conference?
Probably the former. Now, JJ has a lot of experience. I don't think they're scared about if the offense is sluggish in Iowa City, the first real game of the season there. I don't think that they care whatsoever about. Remember, they came out at halftime in Madison, Wisconsin, and put him on the field, and everybody thought that was a huge mistake, and then he drove him down for a touchdown, okay? I don't think that they care about the situation. So I don't think it's that, well, let's get past the Iowa game. If it's the middle of the second, late, if it's halftime and it's 10-7 Iowa, and we can't move the football, and they've got us in trench warfare, their style, I think they have no issue about making the switch then. I just think it has to be that kind of a situation. Because of the respect that Cade has rightfully earned amongst his teammates. I don't think it's a situation that, unless JJ's, intergalactically ahead, I don't believe they're going to let a guy who didn't throw one time in spring ball start the first game of the year over the guy that's probably going to be a captain and the Big Ten returning quarterback. But chemistry works both ways, because ultimately, more than guys like the guys they like the guys that help them win. They want to do that more than anything else. And so that's what I mean. When it becomes obvious now that this guy is your better chance to win, the 3 games on this is really a 4-game schedule. Michigan's going to be a double-digit favorite at least in 8 games. It's a 4-game schedule at Iowa, Penn State, and Michigan State at home, and at Ohio State. Okay, and Michigan's got to at least split those games to get to 10-2 in a New Year's Six bowl and have this season be considered any kind of a success. And so I'm not really worried about it, actually. I'd actually be more worried about it if Cade was dynamite and showed, there is an extra gear there, because then you're talking about, do you lose McCarthy? Now we may not get the Dante Moore kid. You see what I'm saying? The fact that it's getting increasingly obvious that this is just who Cade McNamara is, then I'm not worried about it. Sooner or later, you end up benching. We've seen this with Jim before. You end up benching Alex Smith for Colin Kaepernick sooner or later. And once it becomes pretty obvious that the other guy has taken you as far as he can. And so I'm not as worried about it as I was before the spring.
Colin Kaepernick, I guess it all comes full circle, doesn't it?
In a way it does. And your Hassan Haskins analysis plays too into what I'm saying, and that this will be a different style of team. They have to take the reins off of this team because its strength is in its explosiveness. Okay, and to not play to that is to actually let some teams that are good but should not beat us on our schedule. A competitive Maryland. A game against Nebraska. That's a great example right there. Okay, those are teams that should not beat us 22 versus 22. But if we don't play to where the emphasis of talent is on our team, if we try to force the explosiveness into this style, then, Nebraska's not going to go into Michigan Stadium and beat us 41 to 34, right? Could they go in there and beat us 28 to 24, 31 to 28? Yeah, you see my point? Okay. So that is where coaching and those sorts of things come into play. And if it's very clear that that's what we need now, is we need to look a little bit more explosive, given that's where the talent is. And I think that will invariably at some point lead to a change at the quarterback spot.
So in your scenario, which is very likely that McNamara is the starter out of the gate, but they're grooming McCarthy and waiting for that situation to play out where it's obvious to everyone that he is needed, does McCarthy still have a similar role out of the gate and for the first 4 or 5 weeks that he last
Absolutely.
year?
Yeah.
Maybe the tip-off is that it's even expanded.
Yes. I think it will even be expanded. I think you'll see like whole drives. I think it'll be less situational because he is the guy that adds the extra man in the run game you have to account for that you don't with Cade McNamara. That's what we saw mostly last year, and then they would strategically throw, and you like that dime that he threw against you guys there in the final game. But I think you will absolutely see it expanded. In fact, I wouldn't be shocked if after the first 4 weeks McCarthy doesn't start a single game and still has the team lead in touchdown passes, both because of who they're playing and because I think you'll see an expanded role there. Yeah.
And just to go back to an earlier point, I think this Darius Clemens, maybe he's an example of what we're talking about in regards to depth and speed in layers and in waves versus what it's been in the past, because he's a guy that could probably play this fall, but they don't need him to play this fall. And he showed us, and it's not just a one catch in the spring game. I'm hearing that he's showing that in practice day to day, but the program's arrived at a point or getting very close to it where, hey, this guy's amazing. He could play at this level in the Big Ten, but we don't need him now.
Totally agree. So coming out of this, because it'll be a few weeks before we talk again, if you were going to if you were going to predict what the Vegas win total for this program will be for this fall, what do you think it'll be? Remember, last year it started at 8, I believe. So what do you think the opening win total is for Michigan football this fall?
I'm pretty confident on this one. I'll go 9.5.
I think that's probably accurate. Force you to kind of either go for double digits or not. And I would not be shocked, though, if it's 10, because the name ID of Michigan and the amount of action you'll take in favor of them. And so you try to maybe game plan that out now in advance with a 10. But if I had to guess, I'd guess 9.5 as well. Good stuff, Mark. As always, man, we'll talk to you again soon, all right?
Thanks, Steve. Good to see you.
You bet.